Let me show you another one of these PragerU videos. I got two more. They're relatively short, and then I'm gonna get up out of here because I don't want to be too long-winded, even though it's probably too late for that in many ways. All right, this one is gonna be the Chinese one that he did. Again, take it with a grain of salt. Here we go.
Ni hao, friends. This is Will Witt with PragerU. Today we are at UCLA talking to college students about my costume for Halloween and wondering what they think about cultural appropriation. Let's do it. Oh. Do you like my outfit?
No.
No? Why not? Ni hao. Ni hao. Ni hao. Do people know what ni hao means? It means hello. Ni hao. Hello. Come back and talk to me. Did you get that? What's up, man? How you doing? You like my costume?
You are a
Do you think this is cultural appropriation? Cultural appropriation?
Oh man, you're some.
Yes? Wait, come talk to me. It is not Chinese Awareness Month, but Halloween is coming up. You like my outfit?
I mean, not particularly.
Why are you wearing it?
To celebrate Chinese people for Halloween.
You deliberately try to piss people off, Will. Come on.
Someone's culture or what they wear isn't a costume.
Fair enough. Do you think like eating Chinese food is like cultural appropriation?
No, I eat Chinese food.
Just celebrating Chinese culture.
Wait, I gotta stop
Some
this
white
to comment
dude
on that.
just
Because actually there's a substantive point being made in the trolliest way possible, which is that it ain't obvious what the difference would be between partaking in one aspect of an ethnic culture, which is their food, their cuisine, which we've normed on. Most people don't like trip over that. Even the most whitewashed versions of it, like Panda Express, is not really authentic Chinese food. I don't know if y'all know that. That's the most whitewashed, Americanized version of that shit. Same with Taco Bell and Mexican food or Tex-Mex. But like motherfuckers ain't trying to give up the Chinese food. That shit bomb. Especially if you go down to certain like fucking Chinatown out here in the Bay, or if you go to like, you know, like Chinatown in LA and shit where I'm from. Like that shit bomb. That shit hella bomb. Like we don't want to go so hard on cultural appropriation to where I can't have my mushu every once in a while. Yeah, I mean, like I can't have my sushi rolls. That's Japanese, but you know what I mean? Like I want to be able to partake in the KBBQ too. I want some Korean barbecue. I want some Korean chicken. Yeah, you know I mean, I want some curry. I want some of that. That shit bomb. Don't even get me started on Hawaiian food. I lived in Hawaii for 6 years. That shit is delicious, man. You get the kalua pork, the lomi. Oh, that shit is bomb. The poke. So, but that's interesting because like the people's instinct about it is like, no, food is fine, but dress, that's off limits. And it seems obvious that they haven't really thought about how those are inconsistent with each other. They seem, these particular examples of people, they seem to just kind of be operating from a kind of base instinct of like, I heard this was bad, so I'm not cool with it. But they haven't really like thought about it. And I think this is in some sense a great way of illustrating that this happens by randomly talking to motherfuckers on college campuses where a lot of this stuff is proselytized. So I get that part. Again, we got to take it with a grain of salt. We don't know if he interviewed some people who maybe had some deep shit to say about it, that wasn't quite fitting of the thing he was trying to illustrate or whatever. And so there's a propaganda element to it. You know, people on the right do propaganda just like people on the left do. But I still think there's something valuable that's being illustrated here. And I wouldn't go so far as to say nothing about this is legitimate and nothing about this is useful or valuable. But I mean, there's a clear bias here. This is PragerU. It's right leaning. Will Witt is kind of an unapologetic conservative. All right, let's keep watching this shit. I don't like that he keeps picking on my fucking alma mater though, man. All of us Bruin graduates aren't that vapid. Although to be fair, if he would have interviewed me back when I was at UCLA, I probably would have said some stupid shit too, low key. So, I mean, I wasn't very politically aware frankly, I didn't really care. I was just trying to get through my classes and, keep it pushing. So there may be a little bit of that dynamic too. And I would give people grace the same way I would give myself grace. Because when I was 19 and 20, I was dumb as fuck as far as like not knowing politics. I was learning some stuff, but it was like the beginning of me trying to, address these things or think about these things.
Wearing Japanese attire.
It's Chinese. You shouldn't assume.
Oh, whoa.
A little racist of you.
Don't do them like that, Will.
Oh, okay.
Strikes me as pretty insensitive.
Really? Why is that?
Because it's from another cultural tradition
the music too.
That is not really.
It's like slapdicky, like
clown
something you
world.
should be
like using as a costume. Really.
And then you go to the place where that's like supposedly authentic. And they don't have a problem with it.
I look good.
Good.
Awesome.
I wonder if there were people.
Does
who
my outfit make you?
So I will say this. Another thing you got to take into a grain of salt is like I wonder if there were actually people who were offended by that. In wherever he is, that's supposed to be kind of, I mean, the way it's situated in the video is like this is supposed to be the place where the real members of the culture are, and so their say is supposed to trump that of woke white liberal types or whoever from college campus. That seems to be part of the messaging here. It's a little subliminal, but fairly obvious though still, if you're paying attention. So it's not clear how many people weren't offended on the college campus, and it's not clear how many people were offended in these contexts. And so, again, we have to take it with a grain of salt because they may have edited that part out because it didn't suit the narrative that they were going for. So there's definitely, and it's actually probably likely. I don't know. I actually would be surprised if they didn't have at least a few people who found that offensive because he's clearly not a Chinese person. I would be shocked if not a single and also I don't know how long they were there too. But if they were there for several hours and like not a single Chinese person with liberal values showed up and was like, "Fuck you, get out of here" or some shit. I would actually be surprised if even on UCLA, which is like where it's just like Wokeville, there wasn't some people who were like, "Nah, it's not that bad, it's whatever." Like they weren't tripping like that because there are people like that even at UCLA. There are actually conservatives on the campus of UCLA. So, yeah, I do have some suspicions that those things were edited out because they didn't fit the narrative.
Does my outfit make you mad?
No, good.
Good?
Yeah.
Shay.
I wonder.
Thank.
I'm wondering about the language barrier here too because I don't hear any translators. And I wonder if, because he's just being nice. There's that dynamic too that I'm suspicious about if I'm being objective here and critical.
You?
Yeah.
Do you have to be Chinese to wear this?
You don't have to. Anybody can wear.
What do you think of my outfit?
我很喜欢你这种衣服，
Like your outfit.
很好看。
You really like it?
Yeah.
Looks good?
Good.
It's hard to see in this hat.
So maybe he does. Okay, he does have a translator.
What does
I
that
don't
mean?
think he speaks Cantonese or Mandarin or whatever.
Gonna go with good. You like my outfit?
Quite a bit.
Quite a bit? Oh, thanks, man. Thank you.
I personally don't see any problem with any of this.
Okay. So he threw some of those in there too. Okay. All right. Because I would be surprised if nobody on UCLA was like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Okay. All right. So now I'm still curious whether or not there were people who found it offensive in wherever. I don't know if he went to Chinatown or some shit, but like wherever he was, that's supposed to be like where the authentic Chinese people go. They have the real opinions. Like, I wonder if there were any people that didn't like it, and would he be objective enough to show that? I'm genuinely curious about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're one of the first.
Really? I mean, that's not surprising. That's I forgot where I go to school.
Do you think as a white person I can wear this?
I say whatever you want, just as long as you're not like offensive or like saying racially offensive things.
Yeah.
Just be respectful and you can wear it.
Oh, have you ever been to China?
I've never been to China. But I've been to Chinatown.
Oh, great.
This is where I got the outfit.
Yeah, kids like this, the drum. Yeah, the little kids like this. Yeah.
I'm like a little kid.
Uh-huh. You look very cool.
谢谢.
Yeah, 谢谢.
You like my outfit?
I don't know. It's all right. It's I'm actually from Hong Kong, so.
Oh, really?
It's very back home.
Yeah, there you go.
But like not quite, even like more so, probably exaggerated back home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you Chinese?
Yeah, I'm half Chinese.
Oh, okay. And do you get offended by this costume?
No, I mean like it doesn't bother me. I feel like if you let everything get to you like that, you know, you're not gonna get to the bigger problems in life.
谢谢 for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please share this video with your friends, comment down below what you think, and like this video. Thanks, guys.
All right. You guys get the point. And I'm going to show you one more. It's the same kind of pattern. I might not show the whole thing, but like, I will say that to Steelman the other side, there is a sense in which him wearing costumes like that do kind of perpetuate certain kinds of stereotypes that can be pejorative, because there's exaggerated things, like especially with that beard and stuff like that. Like those are things that are like super exaggerated, and so it's almost like the part of it that I think a lot of people are incensed by, which I do understand, is like the exaggeration and the caricature that it entails. And it's like, you're just putting this on, you're not even like really authentic with it. And in the context of this, it's like he's putting it on to make some kind of political point. And it involves a kind of deliberate trolling to kind of trigger people so that you can get it on camera and then show how crazy people are. So there's that, and it's kind of gimmicky or whatever. And there's not really a good faith engagement with the issue, because you're not Steel Manning at all. You're you're more likely, I don't know what his editing or the people who edited his video, what their decisions were, so I got to take it with a grain of salt. I don't want to speak presumptively, but I would be surprised if they didn't leave out some stuff that didn't kind of fit this narrative. I would be surprised by that. I can't say for sure if they did that, but I would be surprised if they didn't. I did like that they got some people on campus who actually didn't have a problem with it. I would like to see them show people who are supposed to be in Chinatown or wherever. And also, their sample sizes have got to be really, really small, because if they only went to Chinatown and they only went to UCLA and asked these questions, that's a very small sample sizes. There's probably all kinds of places that they can go and get a lot of variations in responses. And if they really wanted to take this seriously, they should have gotten like way bigger sample sizes, and they should have been truly random. And I think that would maximize the academic value and the intellectual value of this, to be fair. So, but the thing that I think people are incensed by is the idea that you have a person who playfully, or for whatever they're kind of innocuous, or sometimes innocuous, or sometimes even nefarious reasons, if they're trolling, are donning something that has a very particular kind of significance, and sometimes even kind of sacredness in a particular culture. And they're just doing it for frivolous reasons, and there's a kind of irreverence there, and I can think of situations in which doing that with respect to certain cultural elements that have a certain kind of sanctity would be offensive, deeply offensive. And so for those right of censor, to kind of give you an analogy, like let's say you're a Catholic. The garb that the nuns and the priests wear have a certain kind of spiritual, religious significance. But if you see people donning those things in the context of like drag shows, or maybe even pornographic films, if you're coming from the point of view of a religious person who views those kinds of things as ungodly, wayward, or whatever, I'm sure that those kinds of things would be offensive to the extent that they were sacrilegious, to the extent that they were kind of unholy bastardizations of things that you find sacred, right? And there's that kind of element, although it's more secular, or it's more cultural as opposed to religious. But it's the meaning of the symbolism behind a lot of these cultural elements that people find sacred, or that people really, really value, they hold in high esteem. And if you're taking those elements and applying them to frivolous things like Halloween costumes, when they actually have a deep spiritual significance, I'm thinking an example of like certain garb that is donned by people in Hawaiian culture, the hula dancers, and the movements and the motions that they make. They actually have very specific spiritual meanings. but in the American context, that kind of thing has been commodified and hypersexualized. And so you have contexts in which people are taking these motions that have deep, like profound spiritual significance to Native Hawaiian people, and they're applying them in situations where they're frivolous. So like, you know, wild, crazy college parties that are Hawaiian themed, and we have like Hawaiian punch and like coconut bras and grass skirts, and it's like an excuse for women to dress as scantily clad as possible in this Hawaiian theme or whatever. They have no understanding of the spiritual significance of any of that. They don't know why, in terms of the cultural history or the background of it, certain motions are used in hula dancing, and certain garb is worn, including but not limited to the grass skirts and things like that. And they don't even just wear coconut bras. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a Native Hawaiian woman wear a coconut bra. The things that they wear are different, and they have like these wondrous, amazing stories, culturally salient stories to tell about the significance of all those things. If you get the right kumu to sit down and just explain that shit to you, it'll blow your fucking mind if you're open to like different cultures and shit. But yeah, like, and it's not about sex at all fundamentally, even though it's easy to sexualize because the gyrations and the movements and the swaying of the hips and stuff like that are things that we are liable in our American minds consciousness to associate with sex, but it's not really about sex at all. It's about being one with nature and a lot of different things like that. One with the aina, which is like the land, nature, things like that. So yeah, man. And I'm not a guru at all. I don't know everything there is to know, but you live in Hawaii for 6 years, some of that stuff, you start learning all that stuff, and it's just deep. So that's just one example that I can give you of where I can see the source of the offense in the kind of refusal to take seriously or act with reverence with respect to those cultural things. But some things aren't even like sacred like that. So for example, food doesn't necessarily have that kind of sacredness, and so it's probably easy to justify, in some sense, sharing or taking food from other cultures. Some forms of cultural dress and garb aren't really spiritual at all, like in the case of like hula dancers. They don't have that kind of sacredness or spiritual significance or cultural salience or significance to them. Some of them are just, they're just things that people wear. They're just regular clothes, but just from a certain culture. And so like a kimono, I don't know enough about the cultures for which kimonos come from, which I think is Japanese culture, but it might be Chinese. And I forgive my ignorance. I don't know enough about those cultures to know if there are any spiritual or profound significances to some of them. It seems like it's just kind of garb that is worn, and maybe there's certain special occasions for them or for it, but it's not like sacred. And so a person who's not of that culture wearing it is not that big of a deal, probably because of that, as opposed to something like donning the stuff that nuns in a convent wear in the religious case, or the garb that a lot of Native Hawaiian peoples wear in the case of hula dancers in whatever halal that they're a part of. So I just kind of want to give some context. I'm trying to, give some credence to all sides on this issue. All right. I'm coming up on the hour mark. I'm gonna do the Native American one, then I'm gonna get out of here because I do want to show at least like a part of that one. The Native American one is going to be interesting. I haven't seen these beforehand. So, all right, here we go.
What's up, guys? This is Will Witt with PragerU. Today we're at the Navajo Nation, and we're talking to people today about political correctness, issues facing their community and their culture. Let's do it. Do you find the name Washington Redskins, is that offensive to you?
I don't think so. In my personal opinion, no. I am a Washington Redskins fan.
I don't think it's terrible, because the Redskins actually came down last year with our Native American people and taught them how to do football, the little kids,
I don't find it offensive. Someone came to me and called me a Redskin to my face. Hey, it's my fault for letting that hurt me. I believe as Navajos and as Native Americans, we have larger issues to deal with than name calling.
like that. I like the Cleveland Indians. So I thought that was pretty cool. But some people would say that was like a drunken native on a logo. You know what I mean? But the Redskins, I mean, that's a historic. That's a fighter. You know what I mean? And like you look at the Patch Copters, you look at the Navajo Code Talkers. You see people jumping on airplanes saying Geronimo. So that's just admiration that the American cultures that's adapting and bringing into their environment.
We can't dwell on the past. Progress is in the future.
This is interesting. So I think I'm more ambivalent about this one just because I'm trying to take into account the various forms of desecration that various different Native peoples have endured, and not just Navajo members of the Navajo tribe, but various different tribes throughout the Americas have had to endure at the hands of colonial settlers and Europeans. Trail of Tears, etc. Shit was fucked up. Shit was diabolical. Millions of Native Americans died by the hands of colonials. And yes, some of those Native Americans killed some of those colonials right fucking back. That happened. This is not no noble savage type shit. I'm not gonna make it sound like they was motherfucking innocent, and I'm not trying to justify it either, because first of all, I'm not really gung ho about violence in general. I'm not a fan, but I understand the impulse for the clapback if you're being attacked constantly by invading peoples, right? And you feel like you need to defend yourself. I understand it, even though I wouldn't condone it. So, well, like with that, and I gave a really quick summary. I can get into more detail. I mean, they gave these motherfuckers like blankets laced with smallpox, fam, and wiped these motherfuckers out to get their natural resources and shit, fo. That's fucked up. Like, no matter where you stand, there's no justification for that shit. It's fucked up. Okay, so I can understand why a Native American person in understanding this history would be incensed by the perception that mostly white people are commandeering the image of the native after all of that they've done historically for something as frivolous as a football game. I understand it. I genuinely do. And that's probably why I'm ambivalent about what these people are saying. And then there's also the things I mentioned before, which is that I don't know how selective these people are being in terms of, propagandizing this. Because I think if they did a lot of delving into this issue, they could find a lot of Native peoples who are genuinely offended by the Redskins and the Indians and etc. But there's levels to it, right? So like there are all kinds of ways that you can view the adoption that we have of certain elements of culture from Native peoples as a form of veneration. Naming weapons of war after either the warriors of the Native peoples like the Apaches or whatever, tomahawk missiles, etc. And adopting a lot of those cultural customs, particularly those around war and getting ready or prepared to battle in the context of a football game or a pre-game in football, like what the Seminoles do when they stab the ground with that like spear thing. I don't know the name of that. Now that apparently has the sanction, the official sanction of the Seminole tribe, and so they get to do that in the college, in the constance of that college, and they have very amicable relationships with that tribe at Florida State University. So they get to continue to do that. Now the Washington Redskins tried to develop those kinds of relationships with various different tribes because I think they wanted to preserve that Redskins name. There were a lot of Native peoples who didn't have a problem with it at all. I've read the interviews. They're perfectly fine with it. But there were some, it seems like a minority of them that were interviewed, but there were some who deeply found it offensive. And so it's hard to weigh because of that, because you have members of the in-group writ large. So there's a big umbrella term, native peoples, indigenous peoples, but there's a bunch of different tribes or whatever, and they may not all agree. So I'm genuinely ambivalent because it's not obvious. It's not obvious what the conclusion can be. You have you have disagreement even amongst the native peoples themselves. Now, these are some examples of the people who don't find it offensive. I'm gonna watch it to see if he finds examples of people who do find it offensive, but it seems like I don't expect him to have too many examples of that, because I think it'll undermine the message he's trying to get, which is that a lot of woke white people are just misguided when it comes to this. They're getting offended on behalf of the native peoples without consulting the native peoples. There are native peoples who genuinely found these things offensive, and I know for a fact because I've seen the footage and read and seen documentaries featuring them. Now, the documentaries have the same kind of shortcomings potentially as this video, which is they may have been selective in their editing too. But at least some of them exist. I've seen both kinds of documentaries with both messages. So I know I'm aware at least of some from both sides. It's hard based just on those sources to tell where the majority lies. But it's not even clear that if the majority of native peoples had no problem with the Redskins, whether or not we should just defer to the majority, because there are people left of center who think that it's inherently offensive no matter what the majority says, which is a fascinating point of view that I don't fully understand.
And so we have to look forward as Native people.
I didn't know if you heard about Elizabeth Warren talking about 1024th and putting that out there. What does that mean to you when she says that?
I think that's just a way of kind of having an advantage, being in a political position. Let me ask you a question back. If I were, maybe in a different country, let's say Ireland, and maybe I had 1%, and I was trying to claim the 1%, you know what I mean? Kind of like that, you know what I mean?
What would you say are the biggest issues right now facing the Navajo community?
That girl's hair is beautiful.
Definitely language.
Hold on. I just want to
culture.
pause and say that girl's hair is fucking beautiful, man. There's a lot of Native women whose hair is just fucking gorgeous, man. And I just want shout out to her. Her hair is beautiful. The way that it shines and sheens. You go, girl.
Preservation.
And realizing that it is something we need to preserve, and it's something very special and unique, something that a lot of people don't get to enjoy. It's a cool thing being Navajo and being Native American in this day and age.
Yeah. If someone were to dress up as a Native American for Halloween, what do you think about that? Someone outside of the community?
There's a fine line there. For me, there are totems, there are pieces of attire and regalia that are authentic and only meant to be worn during certain times or certain acts of ceremony. But if you go to Walgreens or Walmart or the Halloween store or a costume specialty store, you buy something that's obviously fake, I don't really have a problem with that.
The symbolism of the headdress and stuff like that. And I can see how Native Americans traditionally, who may not see it
his hair
as great,
is fly
but as a
too,
young
bro.
person like myself, I think that's
That shit look like
a
it's
cool
perm,
thing that
though,
we get
but
to be
it's probably
represented.
natural.
But when you start mutilating eagles or sacred animals to make up your regalia just for a Halloween costume, then you're crossing a line.
Disrespecting the culture.
Exactly. But as far as cultural appropriation, mankind wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for cultural appropriation. At some point in our history, somebody took the idea of making fire from another culture.
And the Navajos were able to adapt and basically learn from the people that they were and able to integrate that into their own culture. So we were basically survivors. We take a lot of pride in that. And then the Navajo code talkers that were in the South Pacific Theater that used their Native American language, and they were instrumental in every marine action and all the different scattered network islands overseas. And it could have been any other people in the world, but by the blessing of the Creator, we were given and granted that opportunity to protect our homeland, which is America.
But I think it has become very unfortunate that we live in a culture and a society where outrage has become a recreational pastime, where people nit and pick until they find something wrong, and then they become outraged by it. And that, for me, I believe that hurts cross-cultural relationships. I believe it hinders us helping to understand each other. Now here at the museum, I give a lot of cultural lectures and a lot of cultural tours. That's part of my job here. And I always start off every tour and every questionnaire session with, I'm very difficult to offend. And I believe that the most offensive questions are the questions that need to be asked and answered. Because that's the only way we learn, with each other. whether it's between religion, beliefs, cultures, gender. It doesn't matter. The most offensive things are sometimes the most important conversations to have.
All right, guys. So we just finished up here at the Keshmish Festival here at the.
All right, I'm gonna cut it there. So I still am ambivalent. I do hear what the I assume Navajo man was saying about him individually not being that offended. I do wonder how to take into account systemic things, because a lot of times people are really talking about systemic things and not talking about necessarily interpersonal interactions, although the systemic can manifest itself in interpersonal interactions, to be fair, or certain facets of it can give rise to certain kinds of interpersonal interactions as a byproduct. But I'm wondering if the fact that individual Navajo peoples are not offended, the 3 or 4 that they interviewed here, what weight that carries if we're talking about systemic forces whereby certain dominant groups, and that typically the poster child for this are white groups of people, white people in the American context, are appropriating and then benefiting in all sorts of ways, economically, socially, etc., politically, even from the appropriation, to the detriment of the groups that they're appropriating from, because that formulation or aspect or manifestation of this phenomena, which we're calling cultural appropriation, seems to have it would be arguable to say that that's one of the most egregious manifestations of it. And anytime you have something like that going on, I think that even I would object to it. But this is being talked about so nebulously that it's not really clear when you even have an example of that kind of thing. The Washington Redskins clearly was a franchise that was economically benefiting the owners of the franchise, and I don't know that any of the owners of that particular franchise were themselves Native American peoples. So that might be a particular example of the most egregious form, where the aspects of the various different cultural elements of Native peoples were in some sense adapted, adopted, pilfered, stolen, commandeered, or appropriated for the purposes of creating a kind of mascot for a franchise that a lot of people genuinely love, by the way, whether they're indigenous or not. But it was not benefiting in any way that I'm aware of. At least the majority of the economic benefits, let's say, were not necessarily going to the peoples from whom these elements were pilfered or appropriated. And so you might object to it on that basis. And that's very different from saying it's inherently offensive in feelings, therefore we should get rid of it, right? And I just wish that we would be able to be like more clear in our discourse about what we're actually talking about, because it seems like Will is addressing the latter and not the former. The former is something that I think has a way more validity, and that's probably the most steelman version of anybody who wants to take a position against cultural appropriation I can muster. Is that you have a situation with the Washington Redskins, and I keep coming to that because it's more concrete of an example, where the elements from certain Native peoples who have been historically marginalized, by the way, were commandeered or pilfered or appropriated, and the main benefactors of this economically were not those people from which those cultural elements come from. It was the overwhelmingly white people who were the owners of that franchise. They benefited the most. Now, there's maybe some wiggle room in there, some nuance in there about talking about benefits of the Washington Redskins as a kind of cultural phenomenon, because a lot of people benefited even though they weren't owners of the team. The fans, for example, had all kinds of benefits. It was a way to come together and bond around something fun and exciting like football, and the extent to which those cultural elements that were appropriated were central in celebrating the fandom of the Redskins, created an impetus for people to actually learn something authentic about where these the origins, the cultural origins of these customs. That might be a benefit in some derivative way to these native peoples, native tribes. And a lot of the people have actually cited something like that, of like, actually the Redskins were actually involved in the community of my native peoples in various different ways, and actually like it created an impetus for people who are outside of my community to learn about my community, because they were like, oh man, these cultural elements are associated with this thing I love called football in the NFL. So I want to learn all about, like, Navajo peoples and like the Apache and all that kind of stuff, because that shit's awesome, right? And downplaying the value and the significance of that because you want to upsell the sense of victimization. There is an interesting question about the extent to which that's not necessarily valid either. However, I don't want to downplay, to whatever extent there is a kind of injustice being done by taking culturally salient elements and commodifying them in the way that we do regularly, but definitely was done with the Redskins. So I think there's at least a substantive debate to be had here, and there's all kinds of angles to look at it. There's not one way to look at it, but I did want to try to bolster the other side, because I don't think that they're crazy, and I don't think that they're always being a bunch of whiny babies. I do think that there is something to the idea of being vigilant about power dynamics when it comes to these things, and the ways that certain cultural elements get taken by the dominant groups in the context of a society such as ours, and then they get to maximally benefit from it, particularly in economic ways, while the people who originated it don't benefit at all. Like, it's not clear exactly how to talk about that, and to what extent that constitutes an injustice, and to what extent there's anything actionable that can even be done about that. And so raising awareness to it, going back to the professor from earlier, I think is a sound, reasonable thing to do, if only to get us to pay attention to the nuances enough to actually evaluate it properly. And I just wish we could do that a lot better in good faith. And I wish that people were willing to like engage in a way that it's not so dismissive of the other side. Like, sit down and listen, take into account what they're saying. Don't scoff at what they're saying. Try to recognize at least some of the validity in what they're saying. Challenge it too. Give a rebuttal too. But then, like, listen to the rebuttals that come back. Right now, I'm just kind of arguing with myself like a freaking schizo. But I do think there's validity to both sides of this issue. So I'm ambivalent for that reason. Anyway, let me get out of here. I'll leave it there. Look at me. I'm sounding like freaking Tim Pool. But yeah, I'm going to come back with another segment. I got like 2-3 more segments to do. So I'm going to holler at y'all. Until then, peace.